want to make sure that you're seeing the world through their eyes for that conversation and trying to understand what is it they tell themselves. Someone who harms children, as the interrogator, you may decide to say something that you don't believe yourself, like these girls are being seductive to you, weren't they? It's something I find morally reprehensible, right? I want to jump across the table, rip that guy's throat out. But if you present it like that, maybe that's what that guy tells himself. So that lady who's embezzling money from the bank, that teller who's taking money every day, in her mind, she's borrowing that money. She's going to put it back someday when she wins the lottery or has some windfall. And so if I could figure out what they tell themselves that allow them to look at themselves in the mirror in the morning, I can leverage that to get them to tell me the truth. Because I'm going to say to them, listen, either you were stealing this money because you wanted to party and use cocaine and drink and go to Vegas, or you were borrowing this money because you had some serious financial stress in your life and you fully intended to pay it back, but then it all kind of went bad and you got caught before you did. Which was it? Are you some animal who wanted to party? Or are you a good person who was just borrowing the money from the teller drawer? They'll always pick the lesser of those two options. And so that's my big interrogation trick. But it's based in reality, and it's based in the psychology of the bad guy and the fact that they tell themselves lies that make them feel like they're not bad people.
Mm-hmm. So when you're doing the interrogation, I feel like a lot of people, they have the good cop, bad cop, and you have an ability to almost do both, where you're saying like, I break down who the person is. When you're going into the room, like what's your mindset with that and how I'm thinking about this individual?
You do your homework ahead of time, right? Mm-hmm. You're trying to understand who this person is. And then you're basically going to try to understand, again, like I said, you're trying to understand what is it they tell themselves. And you're going to get their side of have them tell you the story. They're going to lie to you. They're going to say, I didn't do it. And then you're going to say, well, listen, I know you did it because I've been reviewing the evidence. There's a financial crime, right? It's not whether you did it or not. We're past that. But what I need to understand is why you did it. And then I get into my little rap, what usually boils down to two options, one that makes them a monster, one that makes them sympathetic, and they'll usually head toward the sympathetic one. And so that's my big interrogation trick. So free to your viewers today on YouTube.
Yeah, I'm telling you, we're making the perfect criminal. So I
know. Okay.
No, I mean, it's important though, because again, it's on TV. People are like, oh, it's good cop, bad cop. But
good cop, bad cop's like, that's 1950 stuff. That's like Army field manual stuff that anyone who's doing good cop, bad cop in 2024 is ridiculous.
Yeah, well, the way you highlight that too, it's like the psychology of the individual. Once you get into that, you'll find the solution if you trained enough and you have at least a little bit of ambition into looking.
You got to have that non-judgmental attitude, right? Yeah. You're not there to punish them. My job is not to punish anyone. It's just to find out what happened. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm non-judgmental, I'm truly trying to show empathy and understand your worldview. And that's whether it's an embezzler, whether it's someone who harms children. You want to make sure that you're seeing the world through their eyes for that conversation and trying to understand what is it they tell themselves. Someone who harms children, as the interrogator, you may decide to say something that you don't believe yourself, like these girls are being seductive to you, weren't they? It's something I find morally reprehensible, right? I want to jump across the table, rip that guy's throat out. But if you present it like that, maybe that's what that guy tells himself, is that these girls that he's harming are being seductive, and that's why he does bad things to children. It's not that he has, not that he's this evil character. I happen to believe he's an evil character, but my job is to get that confession. And so you try to see the world through the bad guy's eyes. How does he rationalize his behavior? And then leverage that.
Have you had a time where it was really difficult to separate that? Or, the example you were just giving, if you have that, I feel like even if you were to do that, there would be a moment after where you'd really have to you need a few days off where you got to be like, I got to collect myself.
Yeah, I mean, these are heavy things, right? I had a guy throw his girlfriend off the railing of a cruise ship over the railing, and he killed her on the first night of a cruise. And so, it's a totally reprehensible act. I mean, this is a woman in the prime of life. But during my interrogation, I needed to kind of see the world through his eyes and say, listen, you didn't get on that cruise to kill her for insurance money, did you? No, of course not. You're not a bad person. I'm looking into your eyes right now. I know you're not a bad person. The reason you did that was probably because you guys got into a fight and she was driving you up your wall. And trust me, I've been married, man. I know how it is when a woman drives you up the wall and she's just coming at you. And you were drinking too much and you lost your mind for a second. Next thing you know, she's going over the railing, and you must feel terrible about that. And I bet if you had a time machine, you could do it differently. Wouldn't you say? And then, yeah. And so you're seeing the world through their eyes and understand that they're scared. They're being interrogated by an FBI agent, and you're putting them at ease by being a nice guy and being cool. There's no upside to shaming them and being mean to them during the course of an interrogation. If you treat people with respect and you try to see the world how they see it, and try to understand them, people want to tell you their stories. They want to tell you why they're not a bad person, even though they did a bad thing.
Do you find it difficult to turn that switch off then after? Like, I feel like this is a skill.
I get so into it's not my job to punish. I mean, obviously I feel terrible for the victims. I feel terrible for the victim's family, especially when there's a loss of life or a person who's been severely hurt. But I take comfort in the fact that there's a criminal justice system out there that's fully equipped to punish them, and it's not my job to punish them. But yeah, the missing kids cases, they're the ones that, you got kids of your own, you stay up at night, you're thinking about that, it gives you a stomach ache, you feel terrible, maybe you cry. So yeah, I've had those cases.
So let's get into what makes the perfect victim then, because I feel like that this might be the most important takeaway from people, where it's what makes a good victim, what are the common places you see with victims, and adding to that, what do you see people most commonly fall for, and what are ways of avoidance that people can kind of act in their life to not fall victim?
Sure. Let's talk about investments, because that's sort of where most individuals are going to get ripped off, and the people watching here. If you can't explain in full detail exactly what you're investing in, you shouldn't be investing in it. Start there, right? Because a lot of these investments that are being offered, especially the fraudulent ones, are incredibly complicated in their explanation, and that's by design. And so a lot of my victims had a difficult time articulating to me what exactly they were investing in, because all they're focused on is the rates of return that are being promised, right? These astronomical rates of return. And again, as we said earlier, the other tell is these victims is they're happy to fall for the idea of high rates of return with low risk, two things that don't exist in the same universe with each other, but it's a commonality in nearly every investment fraud case. They're mesmerized by the affinity group that they're within, right? There's no way this guy would rip me off because I'm Filipino, and the guy is part of my Filipino community. He's the president of the Filipino Chamber of Commerce. There's no way that this investment could be fraudulent. And